What if I told you that beneath the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean lies the ghost of an entire civilization, a continent so advanced, so magnificent, that its legend has haunted explorers, historians, and dreamers for centuries? This is the story of Mu, a land shrouded in myth, whispered about in ancient texts, and dreamed of by those who believe there's more to our past than meets the eye. We've all heard tales of Atlantis, but Mu, sometimes called the motherland of mankind, promises something even grander. A lost world that may hold the key to understanding human origins, advanced ancient technology, and civilizations that flourished long before recorded history began. It's a mystery that tugs at our deepest curiosities, inviting us to look beyond what we know and venture into the realm of what might be possible. Imagine a place where humanity thrived in harmony with nature, where wisdom and spirituality were woven into the fabric of daily life, and where technological achievements rivaled or even surpassed our modern capabilities. That's the vision many have of Mu, a continent said to have sunk beneath the waves in a cataclysm of earthquakes and floods, leaving behind only echoes in the form of enigmatic ruins, cryptic symbols, and scattered oral traditions across Polynesia, the Americas, and Asia. The very idea captures our imagination because it speaks to something universal: the human longing to rediscover our roots, to solve puzzles that have baffled generations, and to believe that our history is richer and more mysterious than textbooks suggest. In this video, we're not just retelling a myth, we're embarking on a journey to explore the evidence, the theories, and the enduring questions surrounding Mu. From 19th century adventurers who claim to have decoded ancient tablets to modern satellite imaging scanning the ocean floor for clues, the search for Mu is a story of obsession, wonder, and the undying hope that some truths are still waiting to be uncovered. You'll discover why this legend persists, what separates fact from fiction, and how the secrets of Mu might reshape our understanding of human history. So settle in, open your mind to the possibilities, and join me as we dive deep into one of history's most captivating enigmas. The story of Mu begins not with a single ancient text, but with a captivating mosaic of global myths that seem to echo a similar heartbreaking tale. Across the vast Pacific, from the islands of Polynesia to the shores of the Americas and into the temples of Asia, indigenous traditions speak of a prosperous ancestral homeland that was lost to the sea in a time beyond memory. In Hawaii, the Kumulipo creation chant whispers of Kahiki Honuakil, a submerged land of origin. The Maori of New Zealand recount the story of Hawaiki, a paradisiacal place from which their great migration voyages began. These aren't isolated stories, they form a collective cultural memory of a catastrophe that severed a people from their roots. This rich tapestry of oral history might have remained a fascinating anthropological footnote if not for the work of a 19th century traveler and writer named Augustus Le Plongeon. It was he, while studying the magnificent ruins of the Maya in the Yucatan, who first proposed the name Mu for this sunken continent. Le Plongeon claimed to have translated ancient Mayan texts, specifically the Trono Codex, which he believed described the cataclysm that swallowed a massive landmass in the Pacific. His work, while later widely disputed and dismissed by mainstream academics, was electrifying. He painted a picture of Mu as the mother culture of humanity, a place of immense sophistication and spiritual depth whose survivors seeded civilizations in Egypt and Central America. The legend was then catapulted into the global consciousness by James Churchward, a British occult writer in the 1920s and 30s. Churchward claimed he had learned the true history of Mu from a collection of ancient clay tablets he discovered in India, which he said were written by the Naacal, a mysterious brotherhood from the lost continent. His best-selling books described Mu as an idyllic, technologically advanced empire that stretched across the Pacific, home to 64 million inhabitants. He wrote of its towering cities, its sophisticated understanding of energy, and its tragic end when volcanic gases beneath the continent destabilized, causing it to sink in a single violent day. Churchward's vivid, almost cinematic descriptions captured the public's imagination, creating the detailed image of Mu that persists in popular culture today. What makes the mythology so enduringly powerful is its resonance with other great flood narratives found in countless cultures, from the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia. This universality suggests a deep, primal human fear of cataclysmic water and a lost golden age. The legend of Mu taps directly into that collective subconscious, offering a potential historical kernel of truth behind these widespread stories. It proposes a single, dramatic event so profound that its shockwaves reverberated through generations, becoming embedded in the founding myths of disparate cultures across the world. It's this compelling blend of specific detail and universal theme that transformed Mu from an obscure theory into a timeless mystery. While Augustus Le Plongeon planted the seed, it was James Churchward who truly built the cathedral around the myth of Mu. A retired British colonel who had served in India, Churchward was a man of his era, an era of grand exploration, spiritualism, and a deep fascination with the occult. His story begins not in the Pacific, but in a monastery in India where he claimed to have befriended a high priest. According to Churchward, this priest revealed to him a collection of ancient, fragile clay tablets, written in a lost language that only a handful of people could still decipher. He called these the Naacal Tablets, and he stated they were the sacred texts of the Naacal Brotherhood, who were themselves the enlightened settlers from the lost continent of Mu. Churchward devoted decades of his life to studying these tablets, asserting that he had learned to read their unique glyphs and symbols. What he allegedly uncovered was nothing short of a complete historical record of a forgotten world. In his best-selling books, beginning with The Lost Continent of Mu in 1926, he described a vast, idyllic continent stretching from north of Hawaii to the far south, a true Garden of Eden. He populated this land with the Muons, a race of 64 million people who lived in a sophisticated, peaceful society free of violence and strife. Their technology, he claimed, was beyond our current understanding, powered by a mysterious energy force called Vril, and their spiritual wisdom was the original source for all the world's major religions. The cataclysm that befell them, as Churchward told it, was both sudden and horrifying. He wrote that vast subterranean chambers filled with volcanic gas collapsed, causing the entire continent to shudder, fracture, and sink beneath the waves in a single, catastrophic day and night of fire and flood. The few survivors, he argued, became the carriers of this advanced knowledge, seeding the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and the Americas. This was the grand, unifying theory that captured the public's imagination, a single origin point for human achievement, tragically wiped from the map. However, the controversy surrounding Churchward's work is as immense as the continent he described. Mainstream archaeologists and linguists have universally dismissed his claims. The primary issue is that the Naacal Tablets have never been seen by any other scholar. No museum, university, or independent researcher has ever been able to examine them, leading many to conclude they were either a complete fabrication or a profound misunderstanding on Churchward's part. His translations are considered fanciful at best, bearing no resemblance to any known ancient language from India or Southeast Asia. Critics argue he was not a trained archaeologist or linguist, but a compelling storyteller who wove together existing myths, his own spiritual beliefs, and the public's appetite for mystery into a powerful, yet ultimately unverifiable narrative. Yet, to simply write off Churchward as a charlatan is to miss his profound impact. He arrived at a perfect cultural moment between two world wars when people were searching for meaning and alternatives to a seemingly fractured modern world. His vision of Mu offered a romantic, spiritual history, a lost golden age that stood in stark contrast to the industrial turmoil of the early 20th century. He gave the legend a specific shape, a detailed history, and a sense of tangible reality that it never had before. Even if his evidence was entirely fictional, the powerful myth he crafted continues to fuel the search for lost civilizations to this day, proving that a story's power often lies not in its factuality, but in its ability to make us wonder what might be hidden beneath the waves of both the ocean and time itself. To understand the evidence Churchward presented, we must venture into the world of ancient manuscripts and mysterious symbols. The cornerstone of his entire argument rested upon the Naacal Tablets, which he claimed were written in the original language of Mu itself. According to his accounts, these tablets contained the entire history of the lost continent, from its creation to its devastating downfall. He described detailed records of their science, their maps of the world, and their spiritual beliefs, which he said formed the basis for all later religions. The problem, as skeptics were quick to point out, is that no one else has ever seen these tablets. No photographs exist, no independent scholars were allowed to examine them, and no known museum or temple in India has any record of such artifacts. This lack of physical evidence leads most academics to conclude the tablets were either a figment of Churchward's imagination or a tragic misinterpretation of something far more mundane, like instructional temple plaques. Beyond his own mysterious discovery, Churchward and later proponents of Mu turned to real, tangible artifacts from other cultures, attempting to find corroborating evidence. A primary example is the Trono Codex, one of the few surviving pre-Columbian Maya books. Augustus Le Plongeon, the initial proponent of Mu, believed his translation of this codex described the cataclysm of a lost land. However, modern Mayanist scholars have completely debunked his interpretation. The actual content of the Trono Codex is largely devoted to astrology, ritual, and divination calendars. It does not speak of global catastrophes or sunken continents. Le Plongeon's translation is now seen as a work of creative fiction, a projection of his own theories onto a writing system he fundamentally misunderstood. This pattern repeats with other inscriptions. Proponents often point to the mysterious Rongo script of Easter Island, which remains undeciphered. Some suggest its unique, flowing glyphs are a surviving fragment of the written language of Mu, carried by refugees to that remote island. While it's a captivating idea, linguists see no connection between Rongo and any known Pacific language family, and it likely developed independently on the island long after any hypothetical sinking of a continent. Similarly, certain Hindu temple carvings in India and complex reliefs in Cambodia have been singled out as depicting the story of Mu's destruction. Yet, mainstream archaeology interprets these images as representations of well-known local myths or spiritual concepts, not records of a geological event on the other side of the world. The act of interpreting these texts and symbols reveals a deep divide between alternative history and academic rigor. Churchward and his followers engaged in what is known as symbolic reading, where a specific symbol like a circle, a wave pattern, or a specific animal is given a universal meaning across all cultures. They might see a recurring glyph that looks like a wave and interpret it as a direct reference to the Great Flood that sank Mu. Archaeologists, however, argue that symbols are deeply culturally specific. A wave symbol to the Maya could represent a water deity, to the Egyptians it might signify the chaotic nun, and to a Pacific islander it could simply mean a good fishing spot. Assigning a single, catastrophic meaning to these diverse symbols is considered a fundamental error in methodology. Ultimately, the textual evidence for Mu exists in a frustrating limbo. The most compelling pieces, like the Naacal Tablets, are unverifiable. The real artifacts, like the Trono Codex, do not say what the myth claims they say when examined by experts. And the symbolic evidence is too ambiguous to provide any concrete proof. This doesn't necessarily dismantle the legend. Instead, it shifts the burden of proof from deciphered texts to a different kind of evidence altogether: forcing us to look not at what is written on clay or stone, but at what might be hidden beneath the vast, silent depths of the ocean itself. But if the texts and symbols offer only ambiguous clues, perhaps the Earth itself holds a more definitive answer. To truly assess the possibility of Mu, we must turn from the realm of interpretation to the hard truths of geology. The central, monumental question is this: could an entire continent simply sink beneath the ocean? The popular image is one of a cataclysmic event, a single day of earthquakes and tidal waves swallowing a landmass whole. From a modern geological perspective, this dramatic scenario is unfortunately impossible. Continents are not like ships that can spring a leak and go under. They are fundamentally different from the ocean floor. Continental crust is primarily composed of granite, a light, buoyant rock that literally floats on the denser, semi-molten mantle below. Oceanic crust, by contrast, is made of heavier basalt. This fundamental difference in density means continents are incredibly difficult to destroy or submerge permanently. They can be worn down by erosion over billions of years, but they do not simply sink. This understanding is the cornerstone of plate tectonics, the unifying theory of geology that has explained the movement of Earth's crust since the mid-20th century. According to this model, the planet's surface is a puzzle of massive plates that slowly drift, collide, and separate over millions of years. Where two plates meet, incredibly powerful forces are at play. One plate can be forced under another in a process called subduction, which is what creates deep ocean trenches and powerful volcanic activity. However, when a continental plate meets an oceanic plate, it is always the denser oceanic plate that is forced downward. The continent, being lighter, buckles and crumples upward, forming massive mountain ranges like the Andes or the Himalayas. A continent being pulled down into the mantle is geologically untenable. It is simply too buoyant. So if a continent can't sink, what could explain the legend? Geologists and oceanographers have proposed several alternative theories that could have inspired the myth of a lost land. One compelling idea is that Mu does not represent a sunken continent, but rather a vast, now submerged archipelago. During the last ice age, sea levels were dramatically lower, as much as 120 meters lower than they are today, because vast quantities of water were locked up in glaciers. This would have exposed enormous stretches of continental shelf, connecting islands that are now separate and revealing vast plains that are now underwater. Places like the Sunderland Shelf in Southeast Asia, which connected islands like Borneo and Java to the Asian mainland, or the vast landmasses around Australia known as Sahul, were all above water. For the ancient peoples living there, the slow, relentless rise of the seas at the end of the Ice Age would have been a catastrophic, generation-spanning event, slowly drowning their coastal settlements and hunting grounds and forcing a mass migration. This slow-motion loss of homeland could easily have been remembered in oral traditions as a single, dramatic sinking. Another possibility points to volcanic activity. The Pacific Ocean is ringed by the famous Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped zone of intense seismic and volcanic activity. Here, the possibility for sudden, catastrophic land loss is very real, not of a continent but of islands. The colossal eruption of the volcano Krakatoa in 1883 obliterated most of the island and was heard thousands of miles away. Even more relevant is the ancient eruption of Thera around 1600 BC, which devastated the Minoan civilization on Crete and likely inspired the Atlantis legend. A similar chain of volcanic collapses and eruptions across the Pacific could have wiped out entire island cultures, creating a powerful narrative of advanced civilization lost beneath the waves. The stories of this event could have been carried by survivors and traders, eventually merging into a single legend of a great continent that vanished. Modern technology has also allowed us to map the ocean floor in incredible detail, and while we haven't found a sunken continent, we have discovered fascinating features that fuel the imagination. Vast underwater plateaus like the Ontong Java Plateau or the Maniaki Plateau are enormous regions of thickened oceanic crust that rise kilometers above the abyssal plain. To a sonar scanner, these formations look like drowned worlds. They are not continental granite, but they represent massive volcanic events, areas where a hotspot in the mantle erupted with unimaginable force, creating a huge landmass that has since cooled and subsided. While these are not lost continents, their discovery shows that the Pacific has a dynamic and violent geological history capable of creating and destroying significant amounts of land. The legend of Mu, therefore, likely resides in the nebulous space between literal truth and powerful cultural memory, a story woven from the threads of real geological events, the universal trauma of rising seas, and the enduring human desire to find a grand, unified origin for our scattered civilizations. No discussion of a lost Pacific civilization is complete without addressing the elephant in the room, or perhaps the city under the sea. The legend of Mu is perpetually linked and often confused with that of Atlantis. They are the twin titans of sunken world myths, but a closer look reveals they are fraternal, not identical, twins born from different traditions and serving different symbolic purposes. The most striking parallel is the shared narrative arc. Both are described as advanced, spiritually enlightened civilizations that met a sudden, cataclysmic end, swallowed by the ocean in a single day and night of fire and earthquake. This core story speaks to a universal human anxiety about the fragility of our own achievements, a warning that even the greatest empires can be humbled by nature's power. Both legends also propose these cultures as a mother or source civilization, suggesting that human history might have had a single, glorious origin point that was tragically erased, leaving behind scattered survivors who had to rebuild from scratch. Yet for all their similarities, their differences are profound and begin with their origins. Atlantis comes to us from a very specific written source, the philosophical dialogues of the Greek thinker Plato around 360 BC. He placed it firmly in the Atlantic Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know as the Strait of Gibraltar. He described it as a powerful, militaristic naval empire that attempted to conquer the ancient Mediterranean before it was destroyed. Its story was presented as a historical account, but many scholars argue Plato was using it as a fictional allegory to make a point about the dangers of hubris and the ideal state. Mu, by contrast, has no single ancient author. Its story is woven from a patchwork of global indigenous oral traditions, 19th-century interpretations of Mayan texts, and the speculative work of writers like Churchward. Its proposed location is the Pacific, a vast and mysterious expanse that felt far more unknown and unexplorable to Western audiences in the early 20th century. This difference in sourcing leads to a key distinction in their perceived character. Atlantis, through Plato's telling, is often depicted as a Bronze Age military power, aggressive, imperial, and ultimately flawed. Its downfall is a moral punishment for its corruption and arrogance. Mu, as popularized by Churchward, is almost its polar opposite, a peaceful, utopian society. It's described as a spiritual paradise where humanity lived in harmony with nature and each other, a pacifist Garden of Eden devoid of war. This makes Mu a more appealing, nostalgic myth for many. It represents a lost golden age of innocence and wisdom we yearn to rediscover, while Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of power. Their modern cultural footprints are also vastly different. Atlantis has been relentlessly explored on maps, with proposed locations ranging from the Mediterranean island of Santorini to the Azores and even Antarctica. Its name is synonymous with any sophisticated lost culture. Mu, however, remains more esoteric. It is deeply entwined with themes of the occult, alternative archaeology, and 19th-century spiritualism. It captured the imagination of the Theosophical Society and later the New Age movement, becoming a cornerstone of belief in ancient advanced technologies and global spiritual unity. While both legends continue to inspire explorers and dreamers, they ultimately answer different human needs. Atlantis warns us of what we might become if we are not careful, while Mu nostalgically dreams of what we might once have been, offering a hopeful, if unproven, vision of our primordial past. If we cannot find Mu in ancient texts or through geological theory, perhaps we should simply look at a map of the Pacific Ocean floor. Modern technology has granted us a god's-eye view of this vast underwater landscape, revealing features that are, without a doubt, mysterious and awe-inspiring. Satellite-derived bathymetry and advanced sonar mapping have painted a detailed picture of submerged mountains, vast plateaus, and strange linear structures that lie miles beneath the waves. For proponents of the Mu hypothesis, these are not just geological curiosities. They are the potential ruins of a drowned world, the sunken architecture of a forgotten civilization. The most frequently cited evidence lies in the Western Pacific, near the islands of Japan and the Ryukyu archipelago. Here, off the coast of Yonaguni-jima, lies one of the most controversial underwater sites in the world, the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered by a diver in the 1980s, this massive formation features what appear to be enormous, flat terraces, sharp right angles, and giant steps that look unnaturally geometric. Some researchers, like the late Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyu, dedicated years to studying the site, arguing vehemently that it is a man-made complex. He pointed to features that resemble carved staircases, ceremonial plazas, and even what looks like a carved human face. If he is correct, these structures would have been above water during the last ice age, potentially forming part of a vast coastal civilization now lost to the sea. However, the scientific consensus strongly leans toward a natural explanation. Geologists note that the sandstone in the region is naturally fractured along parallel planes, and the powerful underwater currents have a relentless sandblasting effect that can create surprisingly smooth, angular surfaces. They argue that the entire formation is a spectacular example of natural sandstone erosion, a product of tectonic forces that tilted the rock and the persistent sculpting power of the ocean. The human brain is hardwired to see patterns and faces in random shapes, a phenomenon called pareidolia, and critics suggest that is precisely what is happening at Yonaguni. We see a monument because we are desperately hoping to find one. Beyond Yonaguni, theorists point to much larger, more diffuse formations. Vast underwater plateaus like the Ontong Java Plateau and the Manayaki Plateau are enormous, raised areas of oceanic crust that rise kilometers above the surrounding abyssal plain. While geologists understand these to be the result of massive volcanic eruptions from mantle plumes, their sheer scale is breathtaking. The Ontong Java Plateau is roughly the size of Alaska. To someone looking at a sonar map, these plateaus can easily be misinterpreted as the outlines of a sunken continental shelf, the drowned bones of a once great landmass. Furthermore, the complex system of seamounts and guyots, flat-topped underwater mountains that dot the Pacific Basin, are often presented as the lost mountains and islands of Mu. Their flat tops are actually the result of erosion at sea level before they slowly subsided beneath the waves, but the visual suggestion of a deliberately leveled plateau is undeniably compelling. Perhaps the most intriguing modern Chinese letter come from digital cartography projects that allow anyone to explore the ocean floor from their home computer. Enthusiasts scouring these maps have identified what they call linear anomalies, long, seemingly straight lines that run for hundreds of miles across the Pacific seabed. The most famous of these is the so-called Emperor's Highway near Hawaii, a series of aligned seamounts and ridges that appears startlingly artificial from a top-down view. The immediate scientific explanation is that these are almost certainly traces of plate tectonics, the visible scars on the ocean floor as a tectonic plate, moves over a stationary volcanic hotspot, creating a straight-line chain of volcanoes. Yet, the sheer precision and length of these features can feel uncanny, fueling speculation that they are the remnants of a colossal, continent-spanning road system or a massive geoglyph on a scale we can barely comprehend. The existence of these formations is not in dispute, the interpretation is. Mainstream science provides coherent, evidence-based explanations for each one, rooted in the well-understood principles of plate tectonics and erosion. Yet the allure of the alternative is powerful. These underwater anomalies tap into a deeper yearning. They represent tangible, physical something that we can point to on a map. They transform the legend of Mu from a purely philosophical idea into a potential, tangible reality waiting for the right explorer, the right piece of technology, or the right shift in perspective to finally be proven true. They are the siren's call for the curious, a reminder that even in an age of satellites and robots, our planet's greatest depths still hold onto their secrets, inviting us to keep looking, keep questioning, and keep dreaming of what might be hidden in the eternal darkness. Beyond the contested geology and cryptic texts, the search for Mu inevitably leads us to physical, tangible places, ancient ruins, and enigmatic artifacts scattered across the Pacific that proponents point to as the scattered wreckage of a sunken world. Perhaps the most visually stunning of these is Nan Madol, a breathtaking complex of 92 artificial islands built atop a coral reef off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia. Often called the Venice of the Pacific, this site is a maze of colossal basalt logs, some weighing up to 50 tons, meticulously stacked like Lincoln logs to form walls, tombs, and canals. To stand before its towering, waterlogged majesty is to feel the presence of a powerful and sophisticated society. For those who believe in Mu, Nan Madol is a perfect candidate for an outpost, or perhaps even a refugee settlement, built by survivors of the cataclysm using the advanced engineering knowledge of their lost homeland. The sheer scale and difficulty of its construction, far from any obvious quarry, suggests a level of organization and purpose that feels almost otherworldly. However, mainstream archaeology offers a different, yet no less impressive, narrative. Carbon dating places the main construction of Nan Madol between the 12th and 13th centuries AD, long after any hypothetical sinking of a continent. The basalt columns, known as prismatic basalt, come from a natural formation on the opposite side of the island, and researchers have demonstrated how they could have been transported on bamboo rafts. The site is understood to be the ceremonial and political seat of the Sordalor dynasty, a powerful line of island chiefs who ruled Pohnpei. While the logistical feat remains staggering, it is a testament to indigenous Pacific Islander ingenuity, not evidence of an external, advanced civilization. The oral histories of Pohnpei itself describe its construction by twin sorcerer kings, not refugees from a sunken land, anchoring it firmly in local history and legend. A similar story unfolds on the most remote inhabited island on Earth, Rapa Nui or Easter Island. Its iconic moai, the nearly 900 massive stone heads gazing stoically inland, are frequently woven into the myth of Mu. The argument goes that such a small, isolated population could never have conceived of, quarried, transported, and erected these colossal statues without the guidance of a more advanced parent culture. The mystery of how they were moved has often been cited as proof of lost technological knowledge. In this version of events, Easter Island becomes a sacred refuge or a last bastion of the Muon people, with the moai serving as solemn guardians of a forgotten history. Again, archaeological science paints a more nuanced and ultimately more human picture. We now know the Rapa Nui people are Polynesians who arrived on the island around 1200 AD. Through experimental archaeology, we have compelling evidence for how the moai were moved using a combination of rocking, rolling, and parbuckling techniques, or simply by walking them upright with a system of ropes, a method successfully demonstrated by researchers. The island's tragic history of ecological decline and societal collapse is a powerful lesson in resource management, but it is a story contained within itself. The Moai represent the incredible spiritual and artistic ambition of a people who thrived in extreme isolation, not a cultural handmaid down from a superior continent. Their purpose was to honor deified ancestors, not to commemorate a global disaster they had no knowledge of. This pattern repeats with other artifacts, from the peculiar stone spheres of Costa Rica to certain megalithic structures in Peru. They are often pulled from their local cultural context and placed into a grand, unified narrative they were never meant to be a part of. This act of recontextualization, while intellectually seductive, does a disservice to the genuine achievements of these diverse cultures. It inadvertently promotes a form of intellectual colonialism that suggests such magnificent works must have an external, often white or light-skinned, originator, rather than acknowledging the profound and independent creativity of indigenous peoples across the Americas and the Pacific. The real wonder isn't that these places might be connected to a mythical motherland, but that humanity's drive to create, worship, and achieve greatness emerged independently in countless corners of the globe, each culture developing its own unique and brilliant solutions to the challenges of existence. The truth, in this case, is far more fascinating than the myth. These cultural echoes form a haunting chorus across thousands of miles of ocean, a shared memory of a homeland left behind. In the Hawaiian creation chant, the Cumulipo, there is a profound and recurring reference to a place called Kahiki. This isn't the Tahiti we know today, but a far more ancient and metaphysical concept, ancestral homeland, a place of origin and deep spiritual power from which the first people arrived. The chant describes it as a fertile land of plenty, a paradise that was eventually abandoned or lost, leading to the great voyages that populated the Hawaiian Islands. This isn't a story of a cataclysm, but rather a melancholic remembrance of a distant, revered place that was voluntarily left during a great migration, a parting that became woven into the very fabric of their cultural identity. Venture south to the islands of Tahiti and the wider Society Islands, and you encounter the powerful legend of Hawaii. In their traditions, Hawaii is not just a place, but the underworld, the source of all life and the destination of souls after death. It is described as a vast, mountainous land, and it is from this mystical place that the great Polynesian navigators originally set forth to discover new islands. This creates a fascinating duality. Hawaii is both a physical point of departure in their oral histories and a spiritual realm in their cosmology. For those searching for Mu, this sounds like a classic case of a real geographical memory evolving over countless generations into a mythological concept, its physical reality fading into a sacred, otherworldly domain. The most compelling and widespread of these migratory legends is that of Hawaiki, the pulsating heart of Maori tradition in New Zealand. For the Maori, Hawaiki is the unequivocal homeland, the place from which their great voyaging canoes like the Arawa and the Tainui departed to eventually reach Aotearoa. It is described in vivid, tangible detail, a place of warmth, of specific yam varieties and tropical flora that don't grow in New Zealand's cooler climate, and of ancient tribal conflicts that spurred the Great Exodus. This isn't a vague spiritual idea. It is a detailed geographical and social memory preserved with remarkable clarity for over 500 years. The story of Hawaiki is one of intentional, if difficult, migration, not a sudden geological disaster. So how do these authentic Pacific Islander narratives, passed down through countless generations, interact with the 19th century construct of Mu? The connection is both seductive and fraught with problems. Proponents of Mu argue that these widespread stories, from Kahiki to Hawaii to Hawaiki, are all fragmented cultural memories of a single, massive continent. They suggest that the original homeland was Mu, and after its destruction, the survivors scattered, each group carrying a corrupted version of the name and the story of their lost world, which then became incorporated into their own unique history. However, this interpretation faces a significant challenge. It imposes an external, Western-defined narrative onto rich and independent indigenous traditions. Modern anthropological and linguistic evidence strongly suggests that Hawaii and its related names most likely refer to actual locations within the known Pacific, specifically Savaii in Samoa. The Great Polynesian Migration was not a desperate flight from a sinking continent, but a deliberate, masterful, and centuries-long exploration of the Pacific by the greatest navigators the world has ever known. They were moving from island to island, from west to east, not away from a central point. Their stories are testaments to their own incredible achievements, not faded memories of a borrowed civilization. The true power of these myths doesn't lie in proving the existence of a literal mu, but in demonstrating the incredible resilience of cultural memory. The Polynesians carried the memory of their origin point with them across thousands of miles of open ocean, a mental anchor to their past. The legend of Mu, in many ways, appropriates this very real and powerful human experience. The longing for a homeland, the trauma of displacement, the pride of origins, and projects it onto a fantastical, singular cataclysm. The genuine article, the actual oral histories of the Pacific, tells a story that is in many ways more impressive, one of human courage, adaptability, and the unbreakable thread of memory that connects a people to their past without needing a sunken continent to make it meaningful. This search for linguistic echoes of a lost world brings us to perhaps the most captivating claim of all, the idea that a universal mother tongue was spoken across the continent of Mu, and that its fragments can still be heard in languages scattered around the Pacific Rim. Proponents of this theory point to startling similarities in words and basic vocabulary across vastly separated cultures, suggesting a common, ancient root that could only be explained by a shared point of origin. For instance, the word for mother appears as mama in languages from Quechua in the Andes to Maori in New Zealand, and even in parts of Southeast Asia. Similarly, the word for father often sounds like papa or tata across these same regions. To the casual observer, this feels like compelling evidence, a linguistic fingerprint left by a civilization that once connected these now distant peoples. The concept gains further traction when we examine the names for certain fundamental concepts. The sun, a central figure in most ancient cultures, is often referred to with names like Ra or La in Polynesian languages, which intriguingly echoes the name of the Egyptian sun god Ra. In the Mayan language, the word for water is Ha, which bears a striking resemblance to the word for water in several Polynesian tongues. These apparent connections form the backbone of the argument for a universal language, painting a picture of a unified cultural and linguistic sphere that was shattered by a great catastrophe, sending survivors to all corners of the globe with shards of their original speech. However, historical linguists, the scientists who study the evolution of language, approach these claims with extreme skepticism, and they do so for very specific methodological reasons. The first major issue is a phenomenon known as false cognates. These are words in different languages that sound similar and have the same meaning, but which have arisen completely independently. The most famous example is the word dog in English and the word dog in the Mbabaram language of Australia, which also means dog. This is an incredible coincidence, not evidence of an ancient connection between England and Aboriginal Australia. Linguists argue that with thousands of languages in the world, and with words consisting of a limited set of sounds, these random similarities are not just possible, they are statistically inevitable. The words most frequently cited as evidence for mu, like mama and papa, fall into a special category linguists call kin nursery terms. These are often among the first sounds a baby makes, combining easy-to-form labial consonants like M and P with simple vowels. It is natural for parents across the world to then assign these universal baby babbles to themselves, leading to the independent creation of similar-sounding words for parents in completely unrelated language families. This is not evidence of a shared ancient language, it is evidence of shared human biology and psychology. To properly establish a genetic relationship between languages, linguists don't look for a handful of similar words. They require systematic, predictable sound changes across a large swath of core vocabulary. They look for patterns. For example, if a proto-language had a particular sound, that sound should change in a consistent way in all of its daughter languages. We see this clearly in the Indo-European family, where the reconstructed word for father, something like ph2-117r, predictably became pater in Latin, father in English, Peter in Sanskrit, and padre in Spanish. This is a demonstrable pattern of descent. The similarities cited by Mu proponents, by contrast, are isolated and random. They cherry-pick a few examples that sound alike while ignoring the thousands of words that are completely different. The grammar, syntax, and the vast majority of vocabulary between, say, a Mayan language and a Polynesian language share no discernible relationship that would satisfy the rigorous standards of historical linguistics. Furthermore, the actual linguistic history of the Pacific tells a different but no less fascinating story. The languages of Polynesia, Micronesia, and much of Melanesia do indeed share a common ancestor, but it is not a mythical language from a sunken continent. It is a language called Proto-Austronesian, which linguists have meticulously reconstructed. This language family began its spread from the island of Taiwan around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, not from a central Pacific continent. Its speakers were incredible seafarers who gradually island-hopped their way across the immense Pacific, their language evolving into the beautiful tapestry of Polynesian languages we hear today, from Hawaiian to Tahitian to Maori. This was a gradual process of exploration and settlement, not a sudden diaspora from a sinking landmass. The real story of Pacific languages is a testament to human courage and adaptability, a slow and deliberate conquest of the greatest ocean on Earth, with each new island generation adding its own unique chapter to the story, all without the need for a cataclysmic event to explain their shared roots. At the very heart of James Churchward's entire narrative, the foundation upon which he built his entire vision of Mu, rests the enigmatic Naacal Tablets. These were the sacred texts he claimed to have discovered, the very source material that supposedly granted him exclusive access to the lost continent's complete history. According to Churchward's account, his journey began not in a library or a museum, but in a monastery in India where he befriended a high-ranking priest. Over the course of several years, he convinced this priest to teach him a forgotten ancient language so that he could read a collection of thousands of fragile, clay tablets hidden within the temple's archives. He called these the Naacal Tablets and identified their authors as the Naacal Brotherhood, an order of advanced beings he described as the original white priests of Mu. The content he attributed to these tablets was breathtaking in its scope. He alleged they contained the entire creation story of the universe and of humanity, placing Mu at the center of it all. They detailed the continent's advanced technology, which he claimed was powered by a mysterious energy force far surpassing electricity. They described a society free of crime and violence, where 64 million people lived in perfect harmony under a sophisticated theocratic government. Most importantly, the tablets reportedly contained a detailed, first-hand account of the continent's destruction, describing how subterranean gas chambers collapsed, causing the land to shudder, break apart, and vanish beneath the ocean in a single catastrophic day. This was the primary evidence, the supposed eyewitness testimony to the greatest disaster in human history. The immense problem, the one that has forever cast Churchward's work into the realm of controversy, is that no one else has ever seen these tablets. Despite his vivid descriptions, he never produced a single photograph, a physical fragment, or even a detailed drawing of the glyphs for independent scholars to examine. He never disclosed the specific monastery's location, and no known religious or archaeological institution in India has any record of such a collection. This complete lack of physical evidence is the primary reason mainstream archaeology and linguistics dismiss his claims outright. Without the original source material, his translations are impossible to verify, leaving them as unsubstantiated stories rather than historical documents. The search for any proof of the Naacal Tablets has been a frustrating endeavor for believers. Some have speculated that the tablets may have been destroyed, perhaps during the political turmoil of India's past, or that they remain hidden in a secret vault known only to a select few. Others suggest that Churchward may have encountered a real but misunderstood artifact, perhaps instructional plaques used to teach temple novices or votive tablets with symbolic illustrations, and he profoundly misinterpreted their mundane purpose as a grand historical record. His descriptions of the script are too vague to match any known ancient writing system from the Indian subcontinent, further deepening the mystery. This elusiveness forces us to confront a critical question. Were the Naacal Tablets a deliberate fabrication, a sincere misunderstanding, or a product of their time? The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a golden age for spiritualism and occultism, a period when many Westerners traveled to the East seeking ancient wisdom. It was not uncommon for figures to emerge with claims of discovering secret texts that held the keys to humanity's past. In this context, Churchward can be seen as a product of this era, a man who may have genuinely believed he had accessed a hidden truth, weaving together existing myths, his own intuitions, and perhaps a real artifact he could not properly contextualize into a compelling and saleable narrative. The Naacal Tablets, therefore, remain the ultimate ghost in the machine of the Mu legend, a source that is central to the story but eternally absent from the evidence room, ensuring that the debate between faith and fact will continue as long as the dream of a lost paradise endures. The dream of finding physical proof of Mu has driven numerous expeditions, blending the bold spirit of adventure with the evolving tools of science. The most famous modern quest began not with a diver in the water, but with a pilot in the air. In the 1930s, the British explorer and travel writer James Kirby undertook a series of aerial surveys over the South Pacific, convinced that a sunken continent would leave behind visible clues on the hundreds of tiny atolls that dot the ocean. He reported seeing what he believed were the remains of paved roads and giant causeways connecting islands, structures he felt were far too large and precise to be the work of the small populations living there. His enthusiastic accounts, published in widely read books and magazines, captured the public's imagination and framed the Pacific not as an empty expanse, but as a watery graveyard of giants, its secrets just barely hidden beneath the sand and palm trees. This romantic vision of discovery soon gave way to the cold, hard data of mid-20th century oceanography, the single greatest advancement in the search, and the one that ultimately delivered the most decisive scientific blow to the idea of a sunken continent, was the development of sophisticated sonar mapping. For the first time, we could systematically chart the abyssal plains, trenches, and mountain ranges of the deep sea floor. Large-scale projects like the Scripps Institution of Oceanography's expeditions began painting a comprehensive picture of the Pacific Basin. What they found was a dynamic, volcanic, and seismically active landscape, but one that was fundamentally oceanic in its crustal composition. There were no vast plateaus of buoyant continental granite lying on the bottom of the ocean. The seafloor was made of dense basalt, as plate tectonic theory predicted. These maps revealed the truth: the Pacific Ocean is, and always has been, an ocean. It holds no drowned continents, yet the human yearning for discovery is not so easily quenched by data. The absence of a continent only made the search for smaller, more plausible evidence intensify. This led to a new wave of expeditions focused on specific, enigmatic sites, the most famous of which is the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. The discovery of these striking underwater formations in the 1980s by local divers sparked a dedicated mission of investigation led by marine geologist Professor Masaki Kimura. For over 2 decades, Kimura and his team conducted countless dives, meticulously measuring, photographing, and mapping the site. He became the structure's most passionate advocate, arguing that features like its clean right angles, perfectly straight tunnels, and what appeared to be carved staircases and altars were undeniable proof of human modification. His expeditions produced detailed diagrams presenting Yonaguni as a complex of temples, stadiums, and monuments, all submerged by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. In direct response, other scientific expeditions were launched to test Kimura's claims. Teams of geologists, most notably Boston University professor Robert Schoch, also dove on the site. Their findings presented a powerful natural counterargument. They pointed out that the sandstone in the region is naturally bedded in horizontal layers and is crisscrossed by vertical joints and fractures. When tectonic activity tilts these beds, the relentless power of underwater currents erodes the softer rock along these fracture lines, creating incredibly sharp geometric features entirely through natural processes. They demonstrated that the so-called carved features were consistent with this kind of natural sandstone erosion found all over the world. The expeditions concluded that while Yonaguni is a breathtaking and geologically significant site, it is almost certainly a natural formation, a magnificent trick of geology that plays on our brain's innate desire to see order and design in random shapes. The latest chapter in the search for Mu has moved from the deep ocean to the digital realm. Modern expeditions are now often conducted by armchair explorers using powerful, publicly available tools like Google Earth. These digital prospectors scan the ocean floors for any unusual linear patterns, perfect circles, or formations that seem out of place. Every few years, a new discovery goes viral. A supposed underwater city spotted off the coast of Cuba, or a grid-like pattern perceived near Hawaii. These anomalies almost always have a mundane explanation upon closer scientific inspection, typically being artifacts of the sonar data collection process itself, such as the path of the survey ship creating parallel lines on the map. Yet, this public engagement shows the enduring power of the legend. The tool has changed, but the mission remains the same: to find that one piece of evidence that will finally prove we are not the first, that a great civilization once walked where now only whales swim. While the legend of Mu is a captivating narrative, it runs aground on the hard rocks of scientific scrutiny. The mainstream academic community, encompassing geologists, archaeologists, and historians, dismisses the concept of a sunken Pacific continent not out of closed-mindedness, but due to a fundamental lack of evidence that meets the rigorous standards of their fields. Their skepticism is built on 3 core pillars: the geological impossibility of a continent sinking, the complete absence of verifiable archaeological proof, and the recognition that the myth itself is a modern construct rather than an ancient memory. The first and most definitive refutation comes from the science of geology. As we've touched on, the theory of plate tectonics, which has been the unifying paradigm in earth sciences since the mid-20th century, offers no mechanism for a continent to sink. Continental crust, composed primarily of buoyant granite, is simply too light to be subducted into the denser mantle below. Think of it like a block of dry pine wood trying to be pushed to the bottom of a lake. It will stubbornly float. The Pacific Ocean basin is underlain by oceanic crust, which is thinner, denser, and geologically distinct. Sonar mapping and core samples have thoroughly confirmed this. If a continent-sized landmass had ever existed there, its remains, vast expanses of granite, would be easily identifiable on the ocean floor. Instead, what we find are volcanic seamounts and basaltic plateaus, all of which are consistent with well-understood oceanic processes. The geology is not ambiguous. It conclusively rules out the existence of a sunken continent. This leads to the second major criticism: a profound lack of empirical archaeological evidence. For a civilization allegedly advanced enough to support 64 million people and build sprawling cities, it has left behind no trace whatsoever. No concentrated fields of pottery shards, no stone tools, no evidence of agriculture or animal domestication, and crucially, no human remains have ever been recovered from the deep Pacific seabed. The arguments put forward by proponents consistently rely on misinterpretation. Sites like Nan Madol and Easter Island are magnificent, but they have well-documented and relatively recent origins within their own cultural context. The Yonaguni Monument remains a fascinating geological anomaly for most scientists. In essence, every piece of evidence for Mu is something else, a local achievement, a natural formation, or a modern fabrication like the Naacal Tablets. In science, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and for Mu, there is not even ordinary evidence. Furthermore, historians and anthropologists point out that the legend of Mu is a classic example of pseudo-history. This is an approach that selectively interprets myths, cherry-picks cultural similarities, and ignores vast amounts of contradictory data to support a predetermined, often sensational conclusion. The narrative created by Churchward and others is not derived from a bottom-up analysis of facts, but from a top-down imposition of a theory onto disparate pieces of information. It engages in what is called hyperdiffusionism, the idea that all major cultural advances stem from a single, superior source. This perspective is now widely rejected because it diminishes the incredible innovative capabilities of indigenous cultures worldwide. The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Mesoamerica, and the moai of Easter Island are not products of a common teacher, but are brilliant, independent inventions of human ingenuity, each solving unique environmental and spiritual challenges in their own way. The scientific dismissal, therefore, is not an attempt to stifle imagination, but a commitment to a methodology that demands testable hypotheses, falsifiable evidence, and logical consistency. The story of Mu fails on all these counts. It offers a seductively simple answer to the complex, interconnected, and beautifully diverse story of human history. While the dream of a lost paradise is a powerful and enduring part of the human psyche, science suggests that the true wonder lies not in a single forgotten world, but in the countless amazing cultures that have risen, thrived, and left their mark on our planet entirely on their own merit. Yet the geological reality of our planet presents a seemingly insurmountable obstacle to this dramatic vision. As we've established, continents built from buoyant granite simply do not sink. So if we are to take the legend of a lost Pacific civilization seriously, even in a metaphorical sense, we must look beyond the idea of a continent plunging into the abyss and consider cataclysmic events that could genuinely destroy a land-based society, events so terrifying they would be remembered for millennia as the end of the world. The most compelling theories for Mu's demise, therefore, aren't about the land sinking, but about the ocean rising with unimaginable speed and fury. The most scientifically grounded explanation points to the profound climatic shifts at the end of the last ice age. For thousands of years, vast glaciers locked away enormous volumes of water, causing global sea levels to be over 100 meters lower than they are today. This exposed immense stretches of continental shelf, creating vast habitable coastal plains and land bridges between islands. What we now see as separate islands in Southeast Asia and the Pacific were once part of a much larger, interconnected world known to scientists as Sunderland and Sahul. Then, as the world warmed, the glaciers melted. This wasn't a gentle, gradual process. It occurred in rapid pulses and sudden surges. Imagine a civilization thriving on these rich, low-lying coastal plains for generations. They would have witnessed the ocean slowly, inexorably reclaiming their land, swallowing their sacred sites, their villages, and their farmland over the course of centuries. This slow-motion catastrophe would have forced a constant, desperate retreat inland or a brave migration across the sea in search of new homes. The collective trauma of losing their homeland foot by foot, year by year, could easily have been condensed in oral tradition into a single cataclysmic event, a great flood that drowned the world in a day. But what if the end was not slow but terrifyingly fast? The Pacific Ocean is ringed by the infamous Ring of Fire, a volatile zone of tectonic activity where the potential for sudden, apocalyptic destruction is very real. A chain of massive volcanic eruptions, far larger than anything recorded in human history, could have devastated a widespread island culture. We have a chilling precedent in the ancient eruption of Thera around 1600 BC, which obliterated the Minoan civilization on Santorini and likely inspired the Plato story of Atlantis. A similar, or even larger, volcanic cataclysm in the Pacific, perhaps a supervolcanic event, could have unleashed tsunamis hundreds of meters high, raining fire and ash across thousands of miles and causing immediate, devastating climate change through a volcanic winter. The few survivors of such an event would have carried with them a story of the skies turning black, the earth shaking apart, and mighty waves scouring the land clean. This is not a sunken continent, but a civilization physically obliterated and its remains buried under layers of volcanic rock or swallowed by the catastrophic collapse of the volcanic islands themselves. Some alternative theories venture into more speculative territory to explain the legend. The concept of a pole shift where the Earth's crust suddenly moves over its core has been proposed as a mechanism for rapid global catastrophe. Proponents suggest such a shift could have caused the Pacific Basin to sink or the oceans to slosh across the continents in biblical floods. While a fascinating concept for science fiction, mainstream geophysics finds no evidence that such a rapid planetary shift has ever occurred. The Earth's crust does move, but through the slow, grinding process of plate tectonics measured in centimeters per year, not in a single catastrophic event. Another theory points to a massive impact from a comet or asteroid striking the Pacific. The resulting megatsunami would have been beyond comprehension, instantly wiping out any coastal or island civilization and leaving a lasting imprint on humanity's collective memory. While evidence for such an impact in this specific time frame is scarce, it remains a geologically plausible, if unproven, scenario for a regional apocalypse. Evaluating the plausibility of these theories requires separating the event from the land. The sinking of a continental landmass is, according to all our current geological knowledge, impossible. However, the utter destruction of a widespread, sophisticated culture, or a network of cultures through rising seas, volcanic fury, or an impact event is not only plausible but has precedent in the archaeological record. The legend of Mu's demise likely doesn't preserve the memory of a continent disappearing. Instead, it almost certainly encapsulates the very real and repeatedly experienced trauma of coastal peoples throughout the Pacific who saw their world vanish beneath the waves, not because the land sank, but because the waters rose, leaving them with nothing but stories of a drowned paradise to pass down through the ages. This reinterpretation doesn't diminish the legend. It grounds it in a human experience of loss that is both heartbreaking and historically resonant. While geology and archaeology may dismiss the literal existence of Mu, the legend found a fertile and enduring home in a very different realm: the world of esoteric spirituality and the occult. It was here that Mu transformed from a hypothetical sunken land into a powerful metaphysical concept, a symbol of a lost golden age that offered an alternative to both religious dogma and mainstream science. This spiritual adoption began in earnest with the Theosophical Society, an influential occult movement founded by Helena Blavatsky in the late 19th century. In her massive and enigmatic work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky proposed a complex cosmology of human origins involving a series of root races. She described the fourth such race as the Atlanteans, who inhabited the lost continent of Atlantis, but she placed an even earlier, more spiritually pure third root race on a massive continent in the Pacific Ocean, which she called Lemuria. Blavatsky's Lemuria was not just a physical place but a state of being. Its inhabitants were described as spiritually advanced, hermaphroditic beings who communicated through telepathy and possessed mystical powers. This vision provided a divine pedigree for humanity, suggesting our earliest ancestors were beings of light and wisdom, whose fall from grace led to our current materialistic state. Theosophy provided the crucial bridge, taking a geological hypothesis and alchemizing it into a spiritual doctrine. This reinterpretation was eagerly expanded upon by a wave of 20th century mystics and channelers who began receiving what they claimed were direct communications from surviving spirits of Mu. These psychic revelations described the continent in vivid, otherworldly detail, far beyond James Churchward's already imaginative accounts. Through trance states and automatic writing, these mediums conveyed messages about Mu's crystalline energy grids, its temples of pure light, and its society's mastery of cosmic forces. The continent was no longer just an advanced human civilization. It was portrayed as an interdimensional gateway or a landing point for benevolent extraterrestrial beings who seeded life on Earth. This process of psychic elaboration added layers of detail that were completely immune to scientific rebuttal. How can one disprove a channeled message from a seventh-dimensional entity? This insulation from factual scrutiny is precisely what made Mu so perfect for spiritual movements seeking truths that existed beyond the reach of empirical science. It became a matter of faith, not fact. The legend's greatest modern resurgence came with the dawn of the New Age movement in the latter half of the 20th century. Here, Mu found its ultimate expression as a metaphor for inner transformation and global healing. The story of a peaceful, ecologically balanced society that lived in harmony with the Earth resonated deeply with growing concerns about industrialization, pollution, and social fragmentation. Mu became a template for what humanity could aspire to regain, a model of holistic living, renewable energy, and heart-centered consciousness. Workshops, books, and meditation practices emerged focused on recalling the wisdom of Mu or healing the trauma of its fall, which was often framed as a collective memory stored in our DNA. This shift moved Mu from an external historical puzzle to an internal, psychological one. Its sinking was reinterpreted not as a geological event, but as a symbolic fall into spiritual ignorance, and its rediscovery became synonymous with humanity's potential awakening and return to unity. So why does this particular myth hold such enduring power in spiritual circles? Its appeal is multifaceted. Firstly, it offers a compelling origin story that bypasses traditional religion and mainstream evolution, providing a sense of noble ancestry and hidden potential. It suggests that our true history is one of glory, not barbarism, and that fragments of this advanced knowledge still exist, waiting to be rediscovered by those who are spiritually attuned. Secondly, it serves as a powerful critique of modern materialism. The image of a sophisticated society that thrived without pollution, war, or gross inequality stands in stark contrast to the problems of the contemporary world, offering a hopeful alternative and a call to action. Finally, the very elusiveness of Mu is its greatest strength. Because it cannot be proven or disproven, it exists in a perfect state of potentiality. It is a blank screen onto which every generation can project its highest hopes and deepest longings for a better world, making the lost continent of Mu not a place that ever was, but a paradise we forever strive to become. While the scientific search for Mu may have reached a dead end, its journey through our collective imagination was just beginning, finding a vibrant and enduring life in the realm of popular culture. The legend's transition from speculative history to creative fuel is a testament to its powerful archetypal appeal, offering storytellers a blank canvas on which to project tales of adventure, wonder, and warning. This cultural adoption began most prominently in the pulpy, adventurous pages of mid-20th century science fiction and fantasy literature. Authors, unburdened by the need for geological evidence, embraced Mu as a setting for epic narratives. Its depiction in these stories often blended James Churchward's utopian vision with the more action-oriented sensibilities of the genre, creating a lost world populated by advanced beings, terrifying monsters, and hidden technologies waiting for a brave explorer to discover. The comic book world, particularly in Japan, wholeheartedly adopted Mu as a central part of its mythology. The most famous example is the long-running series and animated franchise Super Atragon and its various adaptations, which reimagines the lost continent not as a relic but as a thriving, highly advanced underwater empire. In this narrative, the survivors of Mu did not perish but adapted, building magnificent subaquatic cities and developing powerful energy weapons and giant mecha. They often emerge as a formidable, sometimes hostile, force confronting the modern world, representing a classic theme of a forgotten past returning to challenge the present. This portrayal taps into a deep-seated anxiety and fascination with what might lie hidden in the unexplored depths of our own planet, transforming the Pacific into a stage for colossal battles and political intrigue. Cinema, too, has repeatedly drawn from the well of Mu's mythology, though often under the more recognizable alias of Atlantis. Many films that purport to be about the Atlantic lost city actually pull far more from the Pacific legend's lore. A notable example is the Disney animated film Atlantis, the Lost Empire, which, despite its title, depicts a civilization whose aesthetic, technology, and backstory are deeply indebted to the concepts popularized by Churchward. The film's portrayal of a peaceful society powered by a mysterious crystalline energy source, which is catastrophically depleted leading to its downfall, is a direct echo of the spiritual and technological descriptions of Mu. This blending of the two legends in popular media has further cemented their connection in the public's mind, creating a hybridized lost world that draws on the most compelling aspects of both myths. In the interactive realm of video games, Mu has become a versatile and rewarding setting for exploration and discovery. Role-playing games like the Final Fantasy series and numerous others frequently feature locations, ancient races, or powerful magic explicitly named after the lost continent, often presenting it as the source of all magic or advanced technology in the game's world. This allows players to literally walk through the ruins of this forgotten paradise, uncovering its secrets and battling the guardians or horrors that its destruction left behind. The appeal for game designers is clear. Mu provides a pre-packaged, emotionally resonant backstory that instantly grants a world depth and mystery, encouraging players to piece together the puzzle of a great catastrophe through environmental storytelling and discovered lore entries. This persistent presence in our stories, from page to screen to console, reveals something far more significant than a passing fad. Mu has evolved into a modern myth, a powerful symbol we use to explore contemporary fears and aspirations. It serves as a cautionary tale about hubris and the fragility of civilization, reflecting our own anxieties about climate change and technological overreach. Simultaneously, it represents an enduring hope, a belief in a purer, more enlightened past, and the possibility that we might one day rediscover that lost wisdom and harmony. The continent may not exist on any ocean floor map, but it thrives in a different, equally real landscape, the boundless geography of human creativity, where it continues to inspire us to dream of what was and what might yet be again. Unfortunately, the captivating story of Mu is not without its shadowy chapters, marred by deliberate deceptions and well-intentioned but flawed interpretations that have severely damaged its credibility in the eyes of mainstream science. The journey to validate the lost continent has been littered with hoaxes, from outright forgeries to the misrepresentation of legitimate artifacts, creating a minefield for researchers and a field day for skeptics. Perhaps the most infamous example is the case of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, found in New Mexico in the 1930s. This large boulder was inscribed with what appeared to be a condensed version of the Ten Commandments written in a form of Paleo-Hebrew script. For proponents of lost civilizations, it was a bombshell proof that ancient seafarers from Mu or another advanced culture had reached the Americas long before Columbus, carrying with them the seeds of Mosaic law. The implications were staggering, seemingly connecting disparate ancient worlds. However, upon closer investigation by linguists and epigraphers, the inscription was revealed to be a modern forgery. The grammar was flawed, the characters were inconsistently copied from known sources, and the patina on the carved letters suggested a much more recent origin than the rock itself. This hoax and others like it did more than just waste time. It cast a long shadow of doubt over any subsequent claim of anomalous inscriptions, making it exponentially harder for any legitimate, out-of-place artifact to receive a fair hearing. Beyond complete fabrications, a more common and insidious problem has been the severe misreading and misdating of real archaeological sites. A prime case is the so-called Mu or Lemurian colony that some have tried to place in Southern California. Proponents point to the unusual stonework in places like the aptly named Mystery Spot in Santa Cruz or certain rock formations in the hills above Los Angeles, claiming they are the ruins of an ancient temple complex built by survivors of the sunken continent. The reality, confirmed by historians and archaeologists, is far less mystical but no less interesting. These structures are almost universally the remains of early 20th century homesteads, prospectors' cabins, or deposits from the region's extensive mining history. The rough-hewn stones are not part of a sacred megalithic temple. They are the foundations of a sheep pen or a collapsed chimney stack from the 1800s. This eagerness to assign a fantastical, ancient origin to relatively recent historical features not only distorts the actual history of pioneer settlement, but also disrespects the hard work and ingenuity of those early American settlers whose genuine struggles and achievements are erased in favor of a more glamorous myth. The damage caused by these hoaxes and misinterpretations is profound and multi-layered. Firstly, they provide easy ammunition for critics and debunkers. When a prominent piece of evidence is publicly exposed as a fake, it allows skeptics to tar the entire field of alternative history with the same brush, dismissing all inquiry as the domain of gullible amateurs and outright frauds. This creates a hostile environment where open-minded academics are reluctant to even engage with the subject for fear of professional ridicule, stifling any potential for genuine interdisciplinary dialogue. Secondly, these fabrications distract from the more nuanced and potentially valid questions that surround the Mu hypothesis. Instead of discussing the fascinating geological anomalies of the Pacific seafloor or the intriguing parallels in flood myths, the conversation gets bogged down in having to repeatedly debunk the same tired forgeries, preventing the exploration of more credible avenues of research. Ultimately, the prevalence of hoaxes points to a deeper, more human impulse, the overwhelming desire for the myth to be true. This longing can sometimes override critical judgment, leading even sincere believers to cling to dubious evidence simply because it feels like proof. It creates a feedback loop where the lack of concrete evidence fuels the creation of fake evidence, which in turn makes the search for real evidence even more difficult. This cycle has left the legend of Mu in a precarious position, forcing a clear distinction between those who are interested in the mystery as a cultural and historical phenomenon, and those who are committed to proving its literal truth at any cost, even if that cost is the truth itself. To fully understand the place Mu holds in our imagination, we must introduce its conceptual twin, a lost land that emerged from an entirely different branch of speculative thought, Lemuria. While Mu is a child of the Pacific, born from interpretations of Mayan texts and Polynesian lore, Lemuria's origins are surprisingly scientific, arising from a 19th-century puzzle in the field of biology. Scientists were baffled by the presence of lemur fossils on the island of Madagascar and in India, but nowhere in between. To explain this bizarre distribution, a British zoologist named Philip Sclater proposed a radical idea in 1864, a massive, now sunken land bridge that once connected these two landmasses across the Indian Ocean. He named this hypothetical continent Lemuria after the furry primates it supposedly helped to disperse. For a time, this was a legitimate, if unproven, geological theory accepted by the scientific community. This is where their paths dramatically diverge and then fatefully intertwine. The theory of Lemuria was ultimately rendered obsolete by the dawn of plate tectonics, which provided the correct explanation. Madagascar and India were once part of the same supercontinent, Gondwana, and simply drifted apart over millions of years, carrying their lemur populations with them. But just as science was abandoning the concept, the spiritual and occult world eagerly adopted it. Theosophical Society founder Helena Blavatsky, in her influential 1888 book, The Secret Doctrine, seized upon the idea. She reimagined Lemuria not as a zoological land bridge, but as the home of the third root race, a primordial, giant, and spiritually nascent humanity that she described as more astral than physical. In her complex cosmology, Lemuria was a dark, violent place that eventually succumbed to cataclysm, making way for the more spiritually advanced fourth root race, the Atlanteans. This spiritual rebranding is what inextricably linked Lemuria to Mu in the public consciousness. Both became blank canvases for projecting ideas about human origins that stood in opposition to both Darwinian evolution and biblical creationism. They represented a third path, a hidden history of spiritual advancement and catastrophic cycles. Over time, the two concepts began to blur together. Many later writers and mystics, unaware or unconcerned with their distinct origins, used the names Mu and Lemuria almost interchangeably to describe a singular, ancient Pacific civilization. This conflation was further cemented by the work of author James Churchward himself, who sometimes referenced Lemurian concepts to bolster his own narrative of Mu, creating a feedback loop where the two legends nourished and reinforced each other within alternative historical circles. Despite their merging in popular culture, a key distinction in their proposed locations has persisted. Mu is almost always placed squarely in the Pacific Ocean, its story woven through the islands of Polynesia and the coasts of the Americas. Lemuria, following its original zoological premise, is traditionally situated in the Indian Ocean, acting as a bridge between Africa, India, and Australia. This geographical separation allows the myths to cover more conceptual ground, offering two different lost homelands to explain different sets of ancient mysteries. You could say Mu became the go-to explanation for Pacific anomalies, while Lemuria was invoked for the enigmatic connections around the Indian Ocean rim. The enduring appeal of both concepts, whether treated as separate entities or a combined myth, speaks to a profound human desire. They fulfill a deep-seated need for a unified, romantic origin story that predates and surpasses our known history. In a world where academic science often presents a fragmented, complex, and sometimes impersonal view of the past, the stories of Mu and Lemuria offer a sweeping, elegant, and emotionally satisfying narrative. They tell us that we were once part of something greater, more connected, and more enlightened, and that the secrets of our true potential lie not in the future, but hidden in the forgotten depths of our past. This powerful yearning ensures that both names, whether used separately or together, continue to resonate as symbols of a paradise lost, forever waiting to be rediscovered. Yet the quest has been utterly transformed, moving from the realm of speculation into an age of unprecedented empirical discovery, all thanks to a suite of powerful new technologies that allow us to scan, map, and explore the deep ocean with a clarity that would have been pure science fiction to the early proponents of Mu. The most revolutionary tool in this modern arsenal is satellite-derived bathymetry. Sophisticated radar altimeters on satellites like Cryo-Sat-2 and Jason-1 measure the minute variations in sea surface height with incredible precision. It sounds almost magical, but the principle is grounded in gravity. Large underwater features like mountains and plateaus exert a slight gravitational pull on the water above them, causing the sea surface to bulge in a corresponding way. By mapping these subtle bumps and dips across the entire planet, scientists can create stunningly detailed topographical maps of the ocean floor without getting a single instrument wet. This global mapping project has been a public service, with the resulting data available for anyone to explore. For armchair explorers and serious researchers alike, this has opened up the entire ocean floor to scrutiny, allowing for the systematic search for any anomalies that might suggest human activity on a grand scale, such as the sprawling geometric pattern some hope to find. When a promising feature is identified from space, the next step is to send in the robotic pioneers. The crushing pressures and eternal darkness of the deep abyss have long made it the most inaccessible environment on Earth, but modern deep-sea submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, or ROV, are finally shedding light on these depths. These are not the clunky submarines of old. They are marvels of engineering, equipped with high-definition cameras, powerful sonar arrays, robotic manipulator arms, and sophisticated sensors that can analyze the chemical composition of the water and rock in real time. They are the eyes and hands of scientists sitting safely on a ship miles above. These ROVs have been deployed to investigate sites like the Yonaguni Monument with a level of detail previously impossible. They can take precise measurements, gently brush away sediment to examine stone surfaces, and collect core samples, providing the hard data needed to distinguish between a natural sandstone formation and a potentially worked stone block. Every scrape, every laser scan, and every water sample adds another piece to the puzzle, moving the investigation from speculative interpretation toward verifiable fact. Perhaps the most exciting technological frontier is the application of advanced sensing techniques like LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, to underwater archaeology. While traditionally used to map terrain through jungle canopy on land, researchers are now adapting this technology for marine use. Airborne LiDAR can penetrate shallow, clear waters to create high-resolution maps of submerged coastal landscapes, revealing features invisible to the naked eye. This technology is not searching for a continent in the deep Pacific, but it is perfectly suited to finding the kind of evidence that would support the core idea behind the Mu legend, a lost coastal civilization. It is helping archaeologists discover and map vast areas of land that were above water during the last ice age, finding drowned river channels, ancient shorelines, and even the outlines of potential settlements on what was once dry land. These findings don't prove the existence of Mu, but they powerfully validate the historical reality of lost homelands, showing that the rising seas at the end of the Ice Age did indeed swallow vast tracts of territory that were home to human populations, providing a plausible historical kernel for the great flood myths that are so central to the story. So, after decades of this high-tech searching, what has actually been found? The results are a fascinating mixture of breathtaking discovery and sobering reality. The satellite and sonar maps have confirmed the geological truth. There is no sunken continent of granite waiting to be found. The Pacific seafloor is a realm of volcanic basalt, not continental rock. However, these maps have also revealed the true scale and wonder of the underwater world, uncovering colossal features that, while natural, are no less awe-inspiring. We have discovered thousands of previously unknown seamounts, vast hydrothermal vent fields teeming with alien life, and enormous plateaus like the Ontong Java, which is the size of a continent even if it is oceanic in origin. The investigations of specific sites like Yonaguni have, for the vast majority of the scientific community, concluded that it is a magnificent natural formation. The straight lines and right angles, while visually striking, are consistent with the natural fracturing and erosion of sandstone. The search has not found proof of a pan-Pacific civilization, but it has fundamentally expanded our understanding of the dynamic processes that shape our planet and the incredible resilience of life itself, proving that the deepest oceans are still home to wonders beyond our wildest imaginations, even if a sunken empire is not among them. Beyond the geological surveys and archaeological debates, the human element of the Mu legend persists in a captivating collection of sailors' yarns and local folklore, stories passed across ship rails and village squares that speak of ghosts on the horizon. For centuries, mariners traversing the empty vastness of the Pacific have returned with peculiar tales. Some older accounts speak of veteran whalers or Polynesian navigators pointing to a seemingly blank stretch of ocean, insisting that on a clear day or under a full moon, one could sometimes see the faint, shimmering outlines of towers and pyramids deep beneath the waves. These stories often describe a faint, ethereal glow rising from the abyss, a phenomenon they attributed to the still-functioning crystalline energy systems of the sunken cities below. While modern oceanography explains these lights as bioluminescent plankton blooms or the play of light on submerged methane vents, the persistence of these visions speaks to a deep-seated desire to see something more in the featureless blue. One of the most persistent and specific clusters of anecdotes comes from the region around the Caroline Islands, and particularly near Pohnpei, home to the megalithic ruin of Nan Madol. Local lore there is rich with stories of a time when the islands were part of a much greater whole. Fishermen have long told of occasionally snagging their nets not on coral, but on massive, worked stone blocks in deep water far from any known construction. Others speak of a tradition among the oldest families, tales passed down of a great migration from a sinking land to the east, a place of immense power that now sleeps beneath the sea. These aren't stories of discovery but of memory. They are woven into the cultural identity as an explanation for their own incredible and somewhat inexplicable stone architecture. The natives of Pohnpei have their own well-documented history for Nan Madol, yet the presence of these supplementary sinking legends shows how easily a localized memory can be adopted and reinterpreted by outside seekers as proof of a broader narrative. The credibility of these anecdotal accounts rests on a very slippery slope. On one hand, oral traditions are a valid and crucial form of historical record for cultures without a written language, and dismissing them outright is academically irresponsible. The stories of the Maori regarding Hawaii, for instance, have been proven to be remarkably accurate navigational records leading back to specific islands in Polynesia. The problem arises when these distinct and culturally specific histories are stripped of their context and amalgamated into a single, global myth. A story from a Pohnpei elder about ancestral lands lost to rising seas is an authentic record of local sea level change. A story from a 19th century British sailor about seeing glowing temples is likely a combination of mirage, fatigue, and the power of suggestion. Blending them together creates a compelling but ultimately false corroboration. The most famous modern anecdote often cited is the so-called underwater city, sighting off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas, sometimes erroneously folded into the Mu mythology. In 1968, pilots photographed what appeared to be a massive, rectangular road of stone blocks submerged in shallow water. Initially hailed by some as the road to Atlantis or a remnant of Mu, geological analysis confirmed the Bimini Road is a perfectly natural formation of beach rock that has fractured along its natural bedding planes, creating deceptively artificial-looking polygons. This case is a textbook example of how an Iowa count, no matter how exciting, must be subjected to rigorous scrutiny. The human brain is pattern-seeking by nature, a trait that kept our ancestors safe from predators but now leads us to see faces in clouds and cities on the ocean floor. These anecdotes form the emotional core of the Mu legend, providing a sense of immediacy and personal connection that dry geological data can never match. But they remain the least reliable form of evidence, beautiful stories written on water, forever shifting and impossible to hold. Perhaps the most scientifically compelling angle for the Mu narrative isn't a continent sinking, but an ocean rising with terrifying and inexorable force. To understand this, we must journey back to the peak of the last ice age around 20,000 years ago. The world looked radically different then. Vast glaciers, some over 2 miles thick, covered much of North America and Europe. These frozen behemoths locked away an enormous volume of the planet's water, causing global sea levels to be over 120 meters lower than they are today. This dramatic drop exposed vast stretches of what we now know as the continental shelf, creating entirely new landscapes. In Southeast Asia, a massive connected landmass known as Sunderland emerged, linking islands like Java, Borneo, and Sumatra to the Asian mainland. To the north, the Bering Land Bridge created a migratory path between continents, and across the Pacific, countless islands were larger or part of now drowned archipelagos, with lush coastal plains extending far beyond their current shores. For the Paleolithic peoples living in these regions, this was their entire world, a world that would be utterly transformed not by a single cataclysm, but by a slow-motion drowning that spanned generations. Now, imagine being part of a community thriving on one of these rich, low-lying coastal plains. Your people have lived here for centuries. You have established villages, sacred burial grounds, and networks of hunting trails across terrain that we would now find at the bottom of the sea. Then the climate begins to shift. The great glaciers, thousands of miles away, start to melt. You witness the ocean begin its long, relentless advance. It might start gradually. A favorite fishing cove disappears, a freshwater spring becomes brackish. Over decades, the pace picks up. Storm surges reach further inland each year. Salt water kills the vegetation, and your community is forced to retreat again and again, losing precious territory with each passing generation. The oral histories of your people would meticulously record this trauma, the gradual loss of your ancestral home, the names of drowned valleys and forests, the stories of great leaders who tried to hold back the tide. After a few hundred years, the collective memory of this slow-motion catastrophe could very easily condense into a single defining legend, the story of a great flood that swallowed the world in a day. This isn't a myth about the land sinking. It's a profound and historically accurate memory of the waters rising, a trauma seared into the cultural DNA of coastal peoples across the globe. This process of post-glacial sea level rise wasn't always a gentle, linear creep. Scientific evidence from coral reefs and ice cores tells us it occurred in dramatic pulses and sudden surges. One such event, known as Meltwater Pulse 1A, happened around 14,000 years ago, when sea levels are estimated to have risen by over 20 meters in a span of just 400 to 500 years. That is an astonishingly fast rate, roughly 4 centimeters per year, which is more than 10 times the rate we are experiencing today due to modern climate change. For a prehistoric community, this would have been a visibly apocalyptic event. The coastline you knew as a child would be utterly unrecognizable by the time you were an elder. This wasn't a slow retreat. It was a rapid, terrifying inundation that would have forced panicked mass migrations, caused the loss of entire ecosystems, and fragmented populations onto isolated, shrinking high grounds. The psychological impact of such an event is almost impossible to overstate. It provides the perfect, real-world catalyst for the kind of cataclysmic flood narrative that is so central to the Mu legend and so many other global myths. We can see the archaeological footprints of this great drowning today. Dredging operations in the North Sea, an area once known as Doggerland, have occasionally pulled up not only the bones of mammoths and lions, but also the finely crafted stone tools and weapons of the Mesolithic hunters who once roamed those fertile plains. Similarly, off the coast of Australia, submerged Aboriginal sites dating back thousands of years are being discovered, complete with ancient fireplaces and stone artifacts, confirming that people lived on land that is now deep underwater. These aren't the submerged crystal cities of legend, but they are something perhaps more powerful, tangible proof that the stories of lost homelands are based in geological and anthropological fact. The Mu narrative, in its most plausible form, likely encapsulates this universal human experience. It takes the very real, widely shared trauma of coastal displacement caused by climate change at the end of the Ice Age and weaves it into a grander, more mystical story of an entire advanced continent meeting its doom. The legend gives a name, a face, and a glorious history to a profound and ancient loss that was felt by countless communities across the Pacific and beyond, transforming a shared environmental history into a captivating mystery for the ages. This brings us to a powerful and often overlooked dimension of the Mu narrative, its deliberate adoption as a tool for nationalism and cultural identity. While Westerners like Churchward were often seeking spiritual or historical truths, various nations and movements across Asia and the Pacific saw in this lost continent a potent symbol they could harness to forge a unique national identity, one deliberately separate from the shadow of Western colonialism. The legend provided a glorious, ancient pedigree, a way to assert that their cultural roots were not only independent but potentially the very source of civilization itself. This wasn't just about curiosity, it was about crafting a powerful origin story for the modern era, a declaration of historical significance that predated and surpassed the influence of European powers. Perhaps the most profound example of this is found in Japan, particularly in the pre-World War II era. During a period of intense nationalistic fervor and imperial expansion, certain factions within Japanese society and the military embraced a unique interpretation of Mu. They merged Churchward's ideas with their own state Shinto beliefs to create a powerful ideological framework. In this version, the Japanese people were not merely inhabitants of an island nation. They were the direct descendants of the survivors of Mu, the divine children of the sun goddess Amaterasu, carrying the sacred duty to reunite the peoples of the Pacific under their leadership in a sort of modern-day pan-Pacific empire. This ideology was used to justify their expansionist ambitions, framing the conquest of other Pacific territories not as aggression, but as a righteous reunification of the lost children of the motherland. It provided a mythic pretext for the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, suggesting Japan was merely reclaiming its ancient, rightful sphere of influence, a narrative that resonated deeply and tragically shaped the course of history. This process of national myth-making wasn't confined to Japan. Following its own revolution and the end of its monarchy, Siam renamed itself Thailand, a name meaning land of the free. Part of this national rebranding involved a search for a grand, non-royalist historical narrative that could unite the people. Certain Thai intellectuals and political leaders found it in the story of Mu. They proposed that the Thai people were not migrants from southern China, as mainstream scholarship suggested, but were instead the noble descendants of the Muon civilization, a superior race who had carried their advanced knowledge into Southeast Asia after the cataclysm. This theory, though lacking archaeological support, served a crucial purpose. It fostered immense cultural pride, positioned Thailand as a historically significant nation independent of its neighbors, and provided a unifying identity rooted in an imagined golden age of wisdom and power that resonated with the country's new independent spirit. On the Korean peninsula, the myth of Mu also found a receptive audience, woven into the complex fabric of Korean nationalism. Some Korean scholars, particularly those associated with the Daejungjo religion, which worshippers the legendary founder Tangun, incorporated the idea of a lost Pacific civilization into their cosmology. They suggested that the ancient Korean kingdoms, particularly Gojoseon, were either direct offshoots of Mu or that the Korean people were among its primary heirs. This narrative was employed to assert Korea's historical and cultural primacy in East Asia, positioning it as a foundational civilization rather than a nation historically influenced by its larger neighbors, China and Japan. In the face of repeated foreign domination and cultural pressure, the story of Mu offered a source of immense pride and a claim to an autonomous, majestic history that was entirely their own, a psychological bulwark against the forces of imperialism. Even in modern times, the allure of this lost origin story persists within various New Age and nationalist movements across the Pacific Rim. It provides a compelling counter-narrative to the standard, often Eurocentric, history taught in schools. For indigenous rights movements and cultural revivalists, the idea that their ancestors might have been part of a vast, sophisticated network rather than isolated island communities is incredibly empowering. It becomes a tool to reclaim agency over their history, to challenge academic paradigms they feel were imposed by outsiders, and to assert that their oral traditions and cultural practices are the surviving echoes of a greatness that the modern world has simply forgotten. The legend, in this sense, is less about literal geological fact and more about the power of a story to instill pride, foster unity, and demand respect for a culture's profound and ancient place in the world. So where does this leave us in the search for Mu? Can this legendary continent ever move from the realm of captivating myth into the light of verified history? The answer hinges less on finding a single sunken city and more on a fundamental shift in what we consider proof. The old model, championed by Churchward, of discovering a singular, undeniable tablet or a sprawling ruin on the ocean floor is almost certainly a dead end. The geology is clear, and no such evidence has surfaced after over a century of searching. The future of Mu research, if it has one, lies in a more nuanced and collaborative approach, one that listens carefully to the whispers of the past without forcing them to shout a single, unified story. The most promising path forward is through the meticulous work of archaeologists and geneticists studying the real peopling of the Pacific. We are already witnessing a revolution in our understanding thanks to advanced DNA analysis. By sequencing ancient skeletal remains from across Polynesia, Melanesia, and Southeast Asia, scientists are mapping the precise routes and timing of human migration with incredible accuracy. This research could, in theory, one day identify a mysterious, anomalous genetic signature, a distinct population group in ancient DNA that appears without a clear migratory predecessor, potentially suggesting a lost source population. If such a group were found to have contributed significantly to disparate cultures around the Pacific Rim, it would provide a scientific bedrock for a unified origin story, though it would still fall far short of proving an advanced continent. This wouldn't be proof of Mu, but it could be evidence of a forgotten homeland, a real place that seeded the legends. Furthermore, the continued exploration of now submerged Ice Age landscapes will likely provide the most tangible evidence for the kernel of truth within the myth. As underwater archaeology develops more sophisticated techniques, we may discover the remains of sophisticated settlements on the drowned continental shelves of Sunderland or Sahul. Finding a major, previously unknown coastal city that was abandoned due to rising seas around 10,000 years ago would be a paradigm-shifting discovery. It would prove that advanced societal structures existed far earlier and in more places than we currently believe. Such a discovery wouldn't be Mu, but it would powerfully validate the core human experience behind the story, that great civilizations were lost to the waves and their memory echoes in our oldest myths. It would transform the legend from a fantasy into a poetic representation of a very real historical trauma. The role of technology will be paramount in this new search. We are on the cusp of a new era of ocean exploration with autonomous underwater vehicles, or OVE, that can map the deepest trenches with centimeter-level accuracy, and AI-powered systems that can scan millions of sonar images to flag even the subtlest of anomalous patterns. These tools won't be looking for pyramids, they'll be searching for the subtler signs of human activity, unnatural concentrations of minerals, the chemical residue of ancient hearths, or the faint geometric patterns of buried foundations. The proof, if it ever comes, will likely be a cumulative case built on 1,000 small, curious data points rather than one monumental find. Ultimately, the question of whether Mu can be proven may be missing the point. The legend's true power and enduring legacy may not be as a historical fact waiting to be verified, but as a cultural and psychological archetype. Mu represents the universal human longing for a lost golden age, a deep-seated curiosity about our origins, and a warning about the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. In an age of climate change and rising sea levels, the story feels less like a tale of the distant past and more like a poignant allegory for our possible future. The most important discovery we can make about Mu may not be on the ocean floor, but in understanding why this story continues to resonate so deeply within us, compelling generation after generation to look out across the endless blue and wonder what secrets it still holds. Perhaps the most profound lesson Mu teaches us has nothing to do with geology and everything to do with our own psychology. Why does the idea of a sunken world, a forgotten golden age, hold such an irresistible grip on the human imagination across cultures and centuries? It speaks to a deep, almost primal need to believe that our history is grander, more mysterious, and more significant than the sometimes mundane record of archaeology suggests. In a world that often feels fully mapped and explained, legends like Mu reintroduce a sense of wonder and possibility, a tantalizing blank space on the map of time that invites us to dream. This longing isn't a modern invention. It's woven into our oldest stories, from the Garden of Eden to the sunken city of Wise in Celtic mythology. We are a species hardwired for narrative, and the story of a magnificent civilization that fell from grace offers a powerful, emotionally satisfying arc: a rise, a zenith, a tragic flaw, and a catastrophic fall. It's the ultimate epic, and it allows us to project our own hopes, fears, and questions about the fragility of our own society onto a grand, symbolic canvas. On a deeper level, these myths often serve as a form of cultural therapy, a way to process collective trauma and loss. For countless societies that have experienced cataclysmic events, volcanic eruptions, devastating tsunamis, or the slow encroachment of the sea, the story of a single, great drowning provides a framework to understand incomprehensible disaster. It gives a name, a face, and a reason to the chaos, transforming a random act of nature into a meaningful, if tragic, story. This narrative helps make sense of why a homeland was lost, why an ancestral way of life had to be abandoned. It transforms helpless victims into the brave survivors of a legendary catastrophe, granting their descendants a noble and dramatic origin story. The myth becomes a vessel for cultural memory, ensuring that the trauma of displacement is not forgotten but is instead memorialized in a tale that can be passed down for generations, carrying with it the emotional weight of what was left behind. Furthermore, the legend of Mu and its kin act as a powerful critique of the present and a hopeful blueprint for the future. By imagining a past where humanity lived in perfect harmony with nature, free from war, pollution, and social strife, we are implicitly criticizing the shortcomings of our own modern world. Mu becomes a utopian ideal, a benchmark against which we measure our own failings and aspirations. It's no coincidence that interest in lost civilizations often surges during periods of social anxiety, technological upheaval, or environmental crisis. The story offers a comforting thought. If we were once that advanced, that spiritually enlightened, then perhaps we can find our way back to that state. It's a story of redemption, suggesting that our potential for greatness is not ahead of us but buried within us, waiting to be rediscovered. It's a call to reclaim a wisdom we forgot we ever had. This fascination also stems from an innate desire to connect the dots of our disparate human story. The world is vast, and ancient cultures developed in relative isolation, yet they built pyramids, aligned structures with the stars, and told similar flood myths. The idea of a single mother culture like Mu provides an elegantly simple solution to this puzzle. It's far more romantically satisfying to imagine a common, glorious ancestor than to accept the more complex, albeit empirically supported, reality of independent innovation and parallel development. Hyperdiffusionism, the idea that all major cultural advances stem from one source, is a seductive theory because it offers a neat, unified field theory of human history. It satisfies our craving for order and connection, creating a global family tree with a single, majestic root. Ultimately, the enduring power of Mu lies in its beautiful ambiguity. Its inability to be proven or disproven is its greatest strength. It exists in the fertile borderlands between history and myth, a perpetual invitation to wonder. It asks us to keep our minds open to the possibilities of the past while grounding us in the rigorous methods of the present. The search for Mu, therefore, is never really about finding a sunken continent. It is a search for meaning, for connection, and for a sense of wonder in a world that often feels too explained. It is a testament to the fact that some of humanity's most valuable treasures are not gold or crystal, but the stories we tell about ourselves, stories of loss, hope, and the unshakable belief that there are still mysteries left in the world, waiting just beneath the waves of our understanding. And so our journey across the phantom peaks of Mu comes to a close, not with a definitive answer, but with a far more fascinating landscape of questions. We've navigated the turbulent waters between stark geological fact and the powerful currents of human imagination. We've seen how a 19th century geological hypothesis named Lemuria was transformed by spiritualists, and how a traveler's creative interpretation of Mayan texts gave birth to the Mu we know today, a utopian paradise of 64 million spiritually advanced beings, tragically lost in a single cataclysmic day. We followed the controversial work of James Churchward and his elusive Naacal Tablets, a source that remains the ghost in the machine of this entire mystery, forever unverified and yet fundamental to the legend's persistence. We then dived beneath the waves, examining the hard evidence, or rather the profound lack of it. Modern sonar mapping and the undeniable principles of plate tectonics tell us a continent cannot simply sink. Buoyant continental granite refuses to be pulled into the depths. The compelling underwater formations like Yonaguni are, for the vast majority of scientists, spectacular examples of natural sandstone erosion, not the ruins of a sunken metropolis. The breathtaking sites like Nan Madol and Easter Island, while awe-inspiring, have well-documented and recent origins within their own magnificent cultural contexts, testaments to indigenous ingenuity rather than proof of a shared mother culture. This investigation reveals a core truth. The enduring power of Mu lies not in its historical factuality, but in its profound symbolic resonance. It taps into a universal human longing for a lost golden age, a simpler time of harmony and advanced wisdom. It gives form to our deepest anxieties about the fragility of our own civilization, especially in an era of climate change and rising seas. The legend provides an elegantly simple, though scientifically unsupported, answer to the complex puzzle of why so many disparate cultures share similar flood myths and architectural marvels. It is a story we seem to need, a narrative that offers both a warning about hubris and a hopeful blueprint for what we might yet achieve. Perhaps the most compelling takeaway is that the real Mu is not a place on any map, but a place in our collective psyche. It is the archetypal drowned world, a canvas onto which we project our greatest hopes and our deepest fears. The quest for it has driven explorers, inspired inventors, and given countless people a sense of wonder about the past. It reminds us that history is not just written in textbooks, but is also carried in the stories we tell, the songs we sing, and the legends we refuse to let die. So the next time you look out at the vast, endless blue of the Pacific, remember that its greatest secrets may not be hidden in its depths, but in our unshakable human capacity to dream, to wonder, and to forever search for the echoes of a paradise lost. What do you think? Does a part of you want it to be true? Share your own theories and thoughts down in the comments below. I absolutely love reading them.